And next we have House File 951. Representative Richardson, would you like to move your bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House File 951 to be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill.
Rep. Richardson, to your bill.
Thank you. House File 951 builds upon a bipartisan bill that passed in 2020 that would limit dismissals for children participating or enrolled in a pre-kindergarten program. This bill would extend that limitation to students in kindergarten through 3rd grade unless non-exclusionary discipline measures have been exhausted and there's an ongoing issue of a serious safety threat to the child or others. Minnesota is home to some of the worst disparities in school discipline in the nation. Nationally, Black students are suspended at a rate of 3 times more often than white students. Here in Minnesota, Black students are 8 times more likely than their white peers to be suspended or expelled. Nationally, Indigenous students are 4 times more likely than white students to be suspended, but here in Minnesota, Indigenous students are 10 times more likely to be suspended or expelled. Students with disabilities are experiencing disparities as well. In Minnesota, they are twice as likely as their non-disabled peers to be suspended or expelled. The data is clear. Student misbehavior is being addressed differently across race lines and disability. There is wide discretion in school discipline decisions, and within that discretion is where the disparities can form. Today, I'd hope that Dr. Johnson, the former superintendent of Minneapolis Public Schools, could be here to share stories of the work that she's done to address school discipline disparities. Unfortunately, she could not be here. So I want to share a story that she shared with our committee earlier this session. She told us the story of a little Black girl who I believe was in the 1st grade, and she came to school with lip gloss. And during class, she kept applying that lip gloss. Seeing it as a distraction, the teacher confiscated the lip gloss. The student, upset, ran from the room. That student was suspended for creating a disruption and creating an unsafe environment. Compare that with the second story that she shared with us of an older white middle school student who repeatedly kicked a door, destroyed property, and caused significant monetary damage. That child was given a timeout. The reality of different treatment is exactly why this bill is needed. Looking at the data, the #1 reason students are being suspended falls under the category of disruptive, disorderly conduct, and insubordination. With the disproportionate push out of Black, Indigenous, and students with disabilities comes harmful short and long-term consequences. We cannot talk about the opportunity gap without talking about the school discipline disparity. We cannot talk about the achievement gap without acknowledging if kids are not in the classroom, they are going to have barriers meeting developmental and learning milestones. We also have to talk about how suspensions in the early years impact high school graduation rates and impact the school to prison pipeline. Addressing the school discipline disparity is one of the first steps to addressing the opportunity and achievement gap. If kids are not in school, we will not close gaps. This approach is about compassionate accountability. We understand that compassion without accountability doesn't work, but we also know that accountability without compassion doesn't work either. This bill would set up a process for all K through 3rd grade students to be met with the opportunity for support before resorting to a suspension. Today, I have with me Maren Hulden to testify on the bill.
Ms. Hulden, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Chair Richardson, for introducing this important bill. Hi, everyone. My name is Maren Hulden, and I'm an attorney at Legal Aid, which includes the Minnesota Disability Law Center. I'm also here as part of the Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition, which is a group of parents, community members, and advocacy organizations working to end racial disparities in school discipline and promote alternative practices. House Bill 951 is a critical step to ensuring that young learners in Minnesota have full access to school and the supports they need to be successful in school. As Chair Richardson said, it expands the full and equitable participation in early learning provisions to include students in kindergarten through third grade. So this already applied to pre-kindergarten students, and this bill would mean that kindergartners, first graders, second graders, and third graders could not be suspended and could only be expelled or subject to exclusion under limited circumstances. Those limited circumstances are when a student has presented an ongoing serious safety threat and when the district has utilized the non-exclusionary discipline resources outlined in the bill. These include collaborating with the student's family or mental health or education specialists, making a plan with the family about needed supports for the child in school, or referring to additional services such as special education. This is the right approach for kids these ages. Suspensions are not helpful for young learners and, as we know, disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, and students of color. Young students who present with behaviors at school really need support, as those behaviors are almost always the student's way of saying, I have needs that aren't being met. I represented many young clients with extremely disruptive behaviors, some of the more than we usually talk about in this committee. And those behaviors were always my clients' way of demonstrating that they simply couldn't handle the stress that they were experiencing at school for a variety of reasons, and that they didn't have access to appropriate coping skills. And what my clients needed in those circumstances was support to build more appropriate coping skills and to be able to use them in the school environment. Removing students from school in these situations actually makes it worse. It sends a message to the student that they don't belong in school and that school isn't a place that can help them learn how to handle being overwhelmed. This is particularly harmful to students of color who may already experience other barriers to feeling like they belong at school. As Chair Richardson noted, being suspended as a young age has long-term consequences. A U.S. Department of Education policy statement notes that children suspended in their early school years are 10 times more likely to drop out of high school, 10 times more likely to experience academic failure and grade retention, and face incarceration than those who are not. So the racial disparities that we see in the use of suspensions in these young ages drive disparities in educational outcomes throughout students' careers and lives. And research also shows that removing students from school doesn't improve outcomes for other students. This bill removes the options of suspensions, but does allow for expulsions and exclusions in very limited circumstances when the student presents an ongoing serious safety threat and after steps have been taken to support the student. This allows schools to ensure that students who do have those really, really highest levels of need have the supports that they need and can be served in the settings most appropriate to them. We know that many districts and schools across the state are really well on their way to developing and using alternative approaches that are more appropriate to meeting students' needs. And this bill would ensure that young learners across Minnesota don't experience that harmful exclusionary discipline, and instead it encourages getting them the support that they need. We're so grateful to you, Chair Richardson, for your leadership on this bill, and thanks to the committee for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Hulden. Next, we move to public testimony. We have Idil Abdull. Idil, are you with us?
I think so. This Zoom thing, man, I'm too old to get the hang of this. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Members, many thanks again for the opportunity to testify. You know, I was going to read what I wrote, which is part of the written, and maybe if I have time, I can read it in. But Maren was my attorney. I want to just speak to you from the heart as a parent who has a child who has autism, nonverbal autism, and had behaviors that day because the teacher took away his communication device. He speaks either through sign language, which she didn't understand. She didn't know sign language. Nobody taught her. And she took away his Prologo device, so he couldn't tell her what he wanted. And then even though autism is a routine-oriented, like kids with autism are very routine-oriented. You have to take the same route. You have to do the same thing. And at the end of the day, his routine was to go and pick up his jacket and his school bag from his locker, and then they bring him out to the car. He needed one-on-one, right? So they changed this day. The teacher brings him his jacket and his school bag. So his routine is disrupted. And then she takes away his communication device. So he flops to the floor. He's having behaviors. He wants to go through a door And behind that door is where the locker was. And his teacher, Kelly Morris, instead of saying, hey, Abdullahi, tell me what you want, instead of teaching him what Maren just said, who was my attorney with that school district, teaching him what he wanted, teaching him or asking him what he wanted, teaching him how to regulate his behavior, how to cope with his behavior, how to say, okay, nice hands, show me nice hands, use your words, here's your device. She suspended my kid 5 days, not one, not 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 days. My kid didn't understand suspension back then on May 3rd of 2018. He doesn't understand it today. And I tell you, I never took him back to that school. But if I ever did, this kid will go back to his locker, will finish that routine, then will leave. So do we want teachers and principals to punish children because of a behavior that is due to their disability, because the teacher wasn't prepared? She didn't have the resources. And I know the teachers' unions and the principals, they're going to come in and they're going to say, we don't have resources, it's unfunded mandate, and these are all good ideas, and we're already doing something. I'm sorry, but with all due respect, if you were doing what you were supposed to do, you do not suspend children with disabilities due to a behavior that is because of their disability. And so I am heartbroken every day. I'm traumatized every day. If I hear the name Kelly, I have anxiety attacks. If I go back around Jefferson High School, I cry. And this didn't just affect my kid. It affected me. It affected his dad. It affected our whole family. And I don't have time to read all of the testimony that I wrote today, but I'm just going to read maybe some of the quotes of four of my favorite history makers. Because at the end of the day, Madam Chair and members of this committee, you have the power. You have the power to change, to make children stay in school. The child has to stay in school. But I'm going to just read my quotes now because I'm so emotional right now and I'm pissed already. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Suspending kids with disabilities as well as brown and black students disproportionately is injustice. Desmond Tutu said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. The teachers and the administrators in this case are the elephants, while the children are the mouse. You, Madam Chair and members, you must protect the children.
Ms.
Malcolm
Abdull,
X said,
I don't want to cut you off, but
I'm sorry.
you're reaching
I'm
almost
over,
2
yeah.
minutes.
Okay, I apologize, but you can. I hope that you can read my testimony. I thank you so much.
That's your written testimony. That would be great. Thank you. Next, we have Jason Luksik, who is president-elect of MESPA and an elementary principal in Bemidj. Jason.
Madam Chair and committee members, thank you for giving me some time today to talk on this. I'd like to bring your attention to Subdivision 1, the disciplinary dismissals prohibited, that with the Fair Pupil Dismissal Act, that includes exclusion, expulsion, and suspension. And based on that, as a principal, that would take away the ability to suspend a student if we're working with that student and that family. I do see and support the Subdivision 2, the pieces that go along with that to help support that. And those are activities or actions that we take many times as principals to try to get that support and those systems in place. And the biggest thing is, as a principal at Lincoln Elementary and Bemidj School District, we were identified as a disproportionate discipline school with MDHR, and we've been working with them, and I've gone through a lot of different meetings to have those discussions around that data, and the pieces that keep coming up are the subjective and the objective parts of this. And I think that's what really needs to be looked at, because in the last two testimonies you heard, students, and Chair Richardson, you talked about an example that you gave of a superintendent. Those stories are ones that, as a principal, are hard for me to understand as well, because the subjective ones are what we need to focus on. That would take away our ability in this bill, because we wouldn't have that ability to suspend. And I would give you 2 examples. Scenario 1 would be, say, a student, and this doesn't happen much in elementary, but sometimes does. And if we had a student that comes into school with a knife and cuts another student, and they had the intent to hurt another student, that is a subjective piece that, as a principal, I don't know what other options there are. We definitely need to get support services for that student and help their family out and that student out. But at that point, a suspension needs to be in place so that we can that we can support that student, but also keep the safety of the school in mind. Scenario 2 would be a student in gym class that gets very upset during an activity, has a jump rope, and hurts another student, hits that student repeatedly and has bruises because of that. That is another subjective piece. If we look at the other side of the objective, I think that's an area we can work on, that we need to. But at this point, with the bill that's proposed of no suspension before expulsion, I think that's going to really take away our ability. It doesn't happen very often, but it will take away our ability to create a safe environment for our students.
Thank you, Mr. Luksik. Next, we have Sue Abderholden. I must have butchered your name.
It's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Sue Abderholden, Executive Director of NAMI Minnesota. NAMI Minnesota strongly supports House File 951 that would prevent students in K through 3 from being suspended. These young children should not be suspended. They learn nothing from being out of school. Suspension doesn't produce good outcomes. I know Ms. Hulden shared some of it, but we also know some of the studies show that children suspended in younger grades feel rejected by school and actually develop a negative attitude towards school and lose trust in adults. Often we see that children, frankly, just haven't learned how to use their words or express their emotions or how to calm themselves down. They may have experienced trauma, and we have long known that you should be asking not what's the matter with you, but what happened to you. We also know that some mental health concerns begin to emerge in these early grades, particularly anxiety and ADHD. So if we think about some of the actions that might lead to discipline, a child who acts before thinking, easily frustrated, inattentive, poor social interactions, irritable, fear of humiliation, repetitive behaviors, aggressive, can't sit still, intense rigidity, angry, defiant. And these are actually all symptoms of emerging childhood mental illnesses. Some children just simply have what we call lagging skills. They're lagging in executive function skills, language processing skills, cognitive flexibility skills, or emotion regulation, even social skills. We need to teach these children, these young children, these skills. And frankly, some may need some more intensive intervention, including mental health treatment. So instead of suspending them and thinking that a suspension will change behavior, let's teach them how to deal with frustration. Let's teach them some mindfulness practices. Let's understand the trauma that some may have experienced and help them through it. Thank you, Representative Richardson, for bringing this bill, and we urge the committee's support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jules Edwards, a parent advocate and a member of Solutions Not Suspensions. Ms. Edwards.
Thank you, Chair and members. I'm Jules Edwards. I'm testifying with the Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition to support House File 951. Suspensions and expulsions are a tool of abled white supremacy designed to target Black, Indigenous, and disabled students. It is an integral mechanism of the school to prison pipeline. I am the parent of 3 disabled Black and Indigenous children who've been pushed out of public education due to the racism and ableism we've experienced from School District 197, which vehemently denied our experiences of racial and disability discrimination by the superintendent who was in the hearing today and discussed how disparities are improving. They're improving due to the practice of push-outs. Pushout is another form of exclusion that targets disabled BIPAC students, which isn't addressed in this bill, but it is a long-term consequence of suspensions. When my son was in the 2nd grade, another student was angry and told my son he wanted to bomb the school. My son was afraid. He asked the child who made the threat to make sure that no other children were in the school if he bombed it. My son was suspended for asking the student not to hurt students. No one had ever explained to him what to do if a classmate made a bomb threat. No one gave him a script for what to say or do if another student made him feel scared. He didn't have experience with risk management or crisis response. He was a 7-year-old child who was afraid, and he wanted to be sure that he and his schoolmates were safe. I asked him about what happened, and he told me, I just listened to him because I didn't want him to be mad at me, so that's why I talked to him. He was suspended because he didn't have the social skills or professional training to appropriately handle a fellow student in crisis. He did not receive any support to process what had occurred. He did not receive reassurance that the school staff would keep him safe from bombs. He did not receive support to learn, what do we do if another student makes us feel afraid? Students go to school to learn, and what my child learned during that experience is that his feelings and his safety don't matter. After all, he was just a young Black boy being pushed down the school to prison pipeline in the 2nd grade. Prior to this incident, all of the school's behavioral concerns were related to his inability to follow multi-step directions, which is indicative of a disability, not an indication of insubordination. Yet he wasn't evaluated for special education until the 6th grade. Children are in school to learn. Discipline means instruction, not punishment. At the root of the word, that's what it means. When we punish our children rather than teaching them how to make better choices, we are shirking our moral and ethical obligation to guide them into adulthood. We are violating their trust and causing harm. Further, when a disabled child is excluded from school, the school district is not providing a free, appropriate public education. Please support House File 951. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Is there anyone else that's logged into the Zoom who wishes to speak for or against this bill before we go to member questions? All right, I guess not. Let's go to member questions. Rep. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I mean, these are some pretty troubling stories that we've heard, to say the least. I do have a friend that teaches the 3rd grade, and she's told me on numerous occasions where one of her 3rd graders is disrupting the class, is sort of out of control, right? And she has to call paras to come and sit with the child. They cannot touch the child, and she, in the meantime, has to escort all the other students out of the room. And, you know, it's not just a one-off situation. And so my concern, and I know somebody gave testimony that there's no data that it disrupts other kids' learning. I really have a hard time believing that if that's happening on a fairly regular basis, that's not true. Or that is true. My concern here is, you know, are teachers being taught how to diffuse these situations? And I also have concerns where I've heard stories of students as young as 3rd graders going up and punching the teacher in the gut, which sets a really bad example for the other kids in the classroom. And so my head's just swirling with what the solution or solutions would be for these situations, because I feel like the teachers need to be trained, but I feel like, as Ms. Abderholden alluded, that these kids need to be taught coping skills and those sorts of things. But do you teach all of that while they're in the classroom? And how does the teacher have time to teach that child those coping skills while she's trying to control the rest of the classroom? I'm trying to fit the puzzle pieces together on this. And I'm just not sure, maybe I just don't understand, and maybe the teachers on the committee can help me understand how these situations are handled now compared to how they used to be handled. And just what the solution is there while it's happening in the classroom, and what a teacher is supposed to do to advocate not only for that child, but the other kids in the classroom as well. And I don't know who that question goes to, but those are some of my concerns. And I certainly understand that a kid can't learn if they're not in the classroom, but if they're disruptive while they're in the classroom, they're not learning then either. So if somebody could help me put some puzzle pieces together, I'd be appreciative. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Scott, for your questions, well-nuanced questions, and I think it really gets to some of the complexities of the issues. And so when we are thinking about ways that we can address these issues, we know for sure that it's complicated. We have kids who are coming into schools and into classrooms who may have significant histories of trauma. They may have experienced adverse childhood experiences. We are, kids that may have disabilities as well. And you layer all of that on top of the fact that with our youngest learners, where they're at in terms of brain development, I mean, brains aren't fully developed until the late 20s. And so all of those things together can create really difficult challenges for schools and for teachers as well. And so I think as we are looking to what are the solutions and what are the strategies, I think that there's a number of things that have to be taken into consideration. When we're talking about school settings of where there's a disruption that's happening within the classroom, there's nothing within this particular bill that would prevent removal from a classroom. That's handled by a whole different statute in terms of thinking through if there's concerns about harm or if there are concerns about disruption. So that is probably one piece of the puzzle. In terms of thinking through the significant challenges that our students may come to schools with, housing insecurity, food insecurity. We know right now, but for the moratorium on evictions, there would be 10,000 families who would lose their homes. And so I think as we think through some of the strategies around full service community schools and wrapping around mental health services, having trauma-informed schools and teachers and administrators is also a piece of this. So I don't think it's just one thing, Representative Scott, to the question that you are raising, but when we're looking at the data and the number one reason that we see kids being suspended, it's not related to physical violence. It's actually things like disruption, insubordination, which could be the example that I gave, a child becoming upset and running out of the classroom. That was enough to have that child to be suspended. And I think that the root of what we're really trying to get to is how we have children who might have similar behaviors that are happening within our classrooms, but we're seeing kids being treated differently based on race, and we're also seeing kids being treated differently based on disability. And Madam Chair, if you're okay with it, I would also like to have Ms. Hulden respond as well.
Yes, Ms. Hulden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Scott, for the very thoughtful question. And what I hear you grappling with there, those are really tricky things. Like, it's really challenging. And I think, and when we look at situations like the two that you described, and that was my job, representing kids who were doing the things that you're talking about, the solution really starts a long time before that moment in setting up the environment and also working with that student to build those skills. And it takes a while. I mean, you can start with it. If you've ever been in physical therapy, it's kind of like you gotta teach your muscles to get that muscle to get stronger. And then eventually you may be able to use it in the moment that you need it. And so using social stories, using direct instruction, using acting out to, actually the IEP meeting for my son this morning, they were showing social stories like, I am nice to my friends. And, then he learns that by reading it, and then learns it by seeing it. And then over time can use that in a moment of stress. And it can take a while to see progress too. Like I had clients who, when they were feeling overwhelmed by their environment and didn't see, if I'm overwhelmed by an environment as an adult who has had, many years to develop coping skills, I might leave, I might be quiet, I might, put my head down, but I'm at this point, hopefully I'm not doing extremely disruptive behaviors. And that's because I've had the benefit of learning self-regulation. For our children who've experienced just toxic stress or trauma, or whose brains have been wired to be in a fight or flight mode most of the time, they may not have access to those options of, taking deep breaths, trying to leave, trying to walk away. And instead, it's to tear stuff down off the walls. And eventually over time with intensive supports, their coping skill might be to swear, which is a little bit less disruptive than taking stuff down. And then with even more support, eventually their coping skill might be to take a deep breath or to twirl their pencil. But that takes a lot of intensive supports. And you're exactly right. That should not be all on that individual teacher. And that's why what I really like about this bill, it encourages schools to connect students with the supports like special education or like mental health services that can help students move along making that progress towards having access to more appropriate coping skills in those moments that they're experiencing extreme stress. It's challenging. It takes a while. And I know that schools are working on this. And in the meantime, even like Chair Richardson said, even removing from the classroom is an option, but to remove students altogether from the building doesn't give those kids the chance to actually build and use those skills in that environment, which is actually what they need to be able to do so that they can respond more appropriately the next time they experience that kind of stress. Thanks so much for the chance to respond to the question. Thank you, Ms. Hulden. Rep. Scott, do you have a follow-up?
I am grappling with this issue because it isn't a one thing is going to solve the whole issue. And I understand the importance of a bill like this. At the same time, I don't want to have our teachers in the classroom with one hand tied behind their back when they have a student that is acting out, maybe causing potential harm to other students, but is certainly disrupting the classroom. And I'm not talking about carrying lip gloss around and some of these examples. I totally think those are wrong reasons for suspending or removing a child. But in those extreme cases, I'm not sure this bill, I don't know. I'm grappling with it. I'm not sure this bill is going to be the best thing for everybody concerned. And I'm also concerned about the child that's unable to get those supports, what the teacher's supposed to do in those cases if they've tried reaching out to mental health facilities, if they've tried reaching out to the parents and they're just not getting anywhere, that I just don't want their hands to be tied. So I appreciate everyone talking through this, and I'll just listen to the remainder of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Scott. We have a lot of hands, so if people can just ask questions and make comments short, that would be great. Next, Rep. Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for Representative Richardson. What's considered a serious safety threat? And how is that defined? Or who makes that determination?
Thank you. Chair Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so much like what happens now when decisions are made to suspend students, I mean, those are analyses that the schools are going to be in the position to make. And what this bill really does is it offers a universal safety net to kids K through third grade, that before you would move to an expulsion, that you would work through supports. Because what we have happening in practice right now is we have some students who may get supports, and then we have some students who may not get support. And so it's really about, it's an attempt to level the playing field to ensure that all students who are in need of help as a first point of contact is going to get support. And Madam Chair, if Ms. Hulden would like to respond as well, because we know that when things are litigated, things can also be defined as well.
Ms. Hulden, if you can make it quick, I have 4 more hands up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a good question, Representative Erickson. I think that if I would look to other places in statute for reference, this is the difference that I see here is that this also includes the word ongoing. A series of actions that really pose a serious threat to others, of harm to others would be, I would guess. But there are a few references to this type of language in our special education statutes and in the rest of the People Fair Dismissal Act. And so I would look to how courts have interpreted those.
Thank you, Ms. Hulden. Rep. Erickson, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Richardson, in line 2.2, there's a preference to keep the student in the current educational program. But what if that educational setting, like a different one, is more beneficial to the student? Because the setting the child might be in, or even the teacher with whom the child might be assigned, might cause the acting out by the child. So, I would think that locals should be more in charge of making decisions like this, along with parents, because a different educational setting for the child might be the answer. Because I found when I was, and I didn't teach kindergarten ever, except in Sunday school, but I found out that, children misbehave sometimes because that's how they show you they either don't understand, their cognitive abilities are not at the level that maybe you, the teacher, are teaching or explaining. So I think locals have to be empowered to make a lot of these decisions. And if we, even in this proposal, because preschool children now can't be dismissed, unless it's an unusual, and certainly in special education. I don't understand Mrs. Abdull and her ability not to be successful with her child when it seems to me her child was dismissed because of his disability. And, these are questionable things to me when we have what's in law right now. But anyway, to make my point, I think it's really important that local control be the primary decision maker. School boards make discipline policies, and what we should have in law is simply a framework from which they and parents and the school community work toward figuring out what is best for their community. Because in some instances, non-exclusionary discipline might contribute to placing a student in special needs, for example, when that is not the appropriate place. So I think that there are a lot of questions that need to be answered as this proposal moves on. And, I thank you for bringing it before us, but I just have grave concerns about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Erickson. Chair Richardson, do you want to respond quickly?
Yes, I'll respond quickly. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that it's really important to know that when we're thinking through the supports and ensuring that schools are working not only with the child, but with that parent as well, that doesn't take away the ability for there to be decisions to be made that perhaps that the student would be better served in special education or within a different level of school. But it engages not only the ability for schools to make decisions, but for parents as well, and the child to be involved within that as well. And with what we currently have available as a framework, the challenge that we're faced with are the deep disparities that we continue to see. And the deep disparities, again, are related to the subjectiveness of what is occurring. And so we need to be able to get to some sort of leveling of the playing field. Thank you for indulging me, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Richardson. I believe there's too many hands, so I believe Rep. Urdahl, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I'm concerned about students being treated fairly too, and about racial disparity. But I'm also concerned about the safety to students and teachers. I have a question. What if a student, K3, acts out violently to the room they're in, to another student, to the teacher? I actually have a bill that would address that by removing the student from class, not suspending from the school, just from that class for 3 days while causes and remedies are explored. I'm wondering, Representative Richardson, is that in conflict with the idea that you are using in this bill?
Chair Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Urdahl, for your bill. And I guess I would just go back to what's happening in schools right now. Right now, we have kids who are acting out, and to use the terminology that you used, in violent ways. The example of the middle school student that I shared who kicked a door repeatedly and caused significant damage. Again, that student was given a timeout. And so the question that I think that really comes to the root of this bill and why we're here today is to talk about the significant disparities that are persistent within the state. And Minnesota ranks among the worst within the United States, not just as it relates to these discipline disparities, because these disparities also lead to the other disparities that we see across school careers, be it the ability to graduate from high school to the school to prison pipeline, the achievement gap, the opportunity gap. And so until we can get to a place that our students have an equitable opportunity to participate in school equitably, and at this point, we don't even have an equal opportunity for our students to participate as well. And so when we're thinking about equity and we're thinking about particularly students with disability, what equity means is that when there are needs for supports and accommodations, that we're providing those things. And so what this bill is really doing is saying, as a stopgap, before we move to push out, we are going to first start with supporting our youngest learners. We're talking about kindergarten through third graders. And that's the only way that with some compassion, accountability, and support, that kids are going to be on the trajectory to reach their full potential.
Thank you, Chair Richardson. Rep. Urdahl, if you have a follow-up, I'm going to skip you. We have 3 hands up and we're running out of time.
Just real quick.
Okay, make it quick.
Right, thank you. Well, with what I propose, I don't know that that's really in conflict, Representative Richardson, with what you're trying to do, but I'm willing to work with you to try to find ways to reach a solution that could become law. Thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Bowe.
So I think both Representative Frazier and Berg were ahead of me, so I don't want to jump ahead.
Is that all right with you guys? Yeah, they're okay with it.
Oh, so okay. I'll go and I'll be real quick. Actually, I don't even really have a question. It's more just a statement. As I look through the bill, I see several places where it's talking about the pupil's family and parenting and parents and such. And And it really occurs to me that one of the best resources, one of the best tools for a child is a stable family environment. And I would share that most of the teachers I know, including family members, tell me that their students who need the most help are the ones who get the least help from their family. And so at the end of the day, our solutions are going to come from making sure that we have, strong and stable families. But obviously we can't do that today, and we can't do it with a bill before the legislature. But I think that's a huge part of our end solution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Brett Berg.
Madam Chair, can I respond to that very quickly? Yes, I will be brief. And I think that it's really important that that when we're talking about the ways that these disparities can play out, it can play out within families with stable environments as well. I will give you a quick example. When my son was much younger, very talkative in classrooms, he would be one of those kids that would be considered to be disruptive. Had a conversation with this teacher and with this principal about the fact that he would need to be quiet in class. So we worked with him, he went back to school, and the next day he was quiet in class. And then we got another call. And the call was, well, now we're worried about him because he's not talking. So first, he was an issue because he was talking too much. And now he's an issue because he's not talking enough. And the question that I posed to the principal and to the teacher with my son in the room is, he's been told he talks too much, and now he's told that he's not talking enough. Please give us a list of how you'd like my son to appear in the classroom each day. How many words should he say? When should he say them? What should be the inflection in his voice? And so I think it's really important to understand that these disparities cut across family stability status.
Thank you, Chair Richardson. Rep. Bird.
I'll be very brief because obviously many of the points have been made that I've been thinking of as we've listened to this bill. One thing I've been advocating for my youngest child for every year of his education. He's 19 and he's still finishing up credits because of lack of attention to his needs. He was a kid that just got, lost in his own head in class. He was quiet. He didn't act out. Nobody caught it. And as we look at the intersectionality of what is happening, we are talking about fully funding our public schools in regards to class sizes, smaller class sizes, in regards to mental health advocates and school counselors and social workers in our schools. We're talking about, we bandy about achievement gap as if we don't understand that this is where it begins. And I will just comment that as a white woman who was in a position where I could show up at my child's school and advocate, and I was accepted into rooms in a different way than some people might be accepted into rooms. Families that don't have the opportunity to go to the schools to advocate because they're working 2 and 3 jobs. There are systemic issues here that I hope that we are not glossing over because we're worried about language. I thank Chair Richardson for this bill. It will help children like mine and like our other testifiers. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Richardson, do you have a response or do we move on? Okay, thank you. Last but not least, Frazier.
Patiently waiting, I'll be quick. I think everything has been said. I'll just say, Representative Richardson, Chair Richardson, thank you for bringing this bill. This is a disruptor bill. This bill will disrupt a system that we have in place that has created some of the horrendous disparities that we have in our state, and frankly, around the country. And when you have bills that disrupt the status quo, there is often pushback, there is often concern, there are often arguments against why we shouldn't do this. But this bill will provide the opportunities to not default to what the status quo has been. And that has been to provide the most, extreme way to resolve an issue, particularly for BIPOC students, when it comes to how they are behaving, or not misbehaving, but just how they are behaving within the classroom. So thank you for bringing this bill. I look forward to seeing it before.
Thank you, Rep. Frazier. Chair Richardson, any last words?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think just in terms of last words, it's really important to understand what this type of push out does to students, even within the example that I just gave you of my own son. What he got and internalized from that experience was that he was a problem. He was a problem in school if he was talking. He was a problem in school if he wasn't talking. And it's those challenges that we are faced with when we're thinking about, again, addressing these persistent. And I think that we're all in agreement that these disparities are unacceptable. So with that, I think this bill is being laid over, and appreciate the time, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Richardson. House File 951 is laid over for possible inclusion in the Education Omnibus Bill.